you listen to this podcast, I believe God led you here for a reason. Visit thecovenantwoman.org to learn of upcoming events, stay inspired in your faith walk, and feel free to check out the books. If this message blessed you, please pass it along to a friend. Hey friends, welcome back to the Covenant Woman podcast, where we are focusing on the miracle working power of God working inside of you. And we've really been honing into those God-given assignments that God has for each one of us and just learning how to be obedient to his leading. And whether it's uncomfortable or it's scary or it's something that's completely unknown, just learning how to say yes to him. And my guest today is the perfect example of that. And I'm honored to have her here with us today. She's actually one of my mentors. She's helped me so much. She's made a huge impact on my life, and I know she's making an impact on so many other women's lives. She is an incredible woman. She is a child of God. She is a life coach. She, like I said, she's my mentor. She mentors other women as well. She's a mom. She's a grandma. She does so many things and wears so many hats, and I'm just honored to introduce my friend Jenna Dexter. Thank you so much for being here with us, Jenna.
Thank you, Shay. I'm so excited to be here. You are such a bright, shining light in my life and in the women's lives in our little community. And I know that you are making such an impact on the lives of others, stepping out into your calling and your gifting and being brave and doing the things and making that impact that, I'm such a purpose-driven woman. I just love seeing other people being out there doing the thing, right? And then we inspire others, and then they do their thing, and they inspire others. And it's a trickle effect, right? We're all doing our part. So I love that.
Too. And, you've inspired me so much and just helping me stay accountable to those things that God is calling me to do. And I'm so appreciative. So thank you so much for all that you've done for me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you for encouraging me to keep doing it because, the more you do that, it just builds me up. It's like, yeah, okay, say more of that. And that helps me do more of what I do, right? The more we encourage each other. Encouragement is so huge. I think more people need it than we realize,
I agree. It helps tremendously for all of us trying to walk in that fullness of who God's called us to be. So for everybody listening, we were talking a little bit before we hit the record button here. Jen and I are kind of on opposite ends here. Usually, up until this season, I've never done interviews with anybody. I've never interviewed anyone on a podcast, or I don't think ever for that matter. And Jenna, she actually has a podcast. She's usually on the other end of things as far as helping women and just mentoring women. And so we're just pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones and doing the things that God's leading us to do, and hopefully will inspire you to do the same. So Jenna, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
All righty. Well, so you already mentioned that I'm a mother and a grandmother. I know that everybody says that I don't look nearly old enough for, being a grandmother. So thank you for thinking that. I have two adult. I have two adult daughters, and one of them has two little darling granddaughters, almost 2 and 4. And they are just the light of my life. They're such a blessing. And so I'm their Nana. My name is Jenna, so I go by Nana, N-E-N-N-A, as my grandma name. Not Nana, it's Nana. And anyway, so that's a joy in my life. And then I have been divorced for 10 years. Sadly, I was never ever going to be, the divorced Christian woman. I had some work to do to get rid of that D on my chest that I put there myself. But we're done and gone with that and moving on. But yeah, that was a huge shift in my life. Obviously, for anyone who's gone through anything like that, we all go through traumas of various sorts. And for me, divorce came out of nowhere for me. I was a wife, homeschool mom, homemaker for 23 years. And I had no career. I had no degree. I had no viable source of financial support. And so I suddenly found myself alone going, what the heck am I going to do? And really needing to lean into God and cling to him during that season and since then. And so, I've come out the other side as a purpose-driven woman that I've always been. I grew up in a very purpose-driven family doing prison ministry. My dad was a pastor. Once my mom found out that my brother and I could sing harmony, she was like, we're going on the road because we're a very musical family. And so I just grew up, that's what you do. You're not just a Christian. You don't just sit in a pew, but you do something with what God has given you, and you go out and you share it, and you figure out what gifts do I have, and you go out and you share it with the world. And so now that I was newly single and on my own, and like, okay, so now what? Now what for the rest of my life? I have such a passion for women. I just feel kind of called to work with women and mentor and inspire them in their relationship with God, help them to grow, help them to believe that more is possible than they might imagine, that they are stronger, more capable than they know, and they can do hard things, which are all the things that I learned about myself, as a single woman that didn't have the degree, the job, any of the things, and had to figure out what to do. I found out that I was stronger than I knew, more capable. Yeah, I can do hard things. And so I impart all of those things to other women when we start asking those questions. Well, if you could do anything you wanted, what would you do? And well, let's talk about what the possibilities are for how you can make that happen. And basically, as a life coach, eventually God led me to that, to becoming a life coach. I found out that it was a very natural thing for me to coach and mentor women. So I coach one-on-one women, but I also have Total Thrive Women membership, which you're a part of. So I like to call Total Thrive Women a community of like-minded Christian women in hot pursuit of living their most thriving and purpose-filled life. I help get clear, stay focused, and get things done. So that's our little group of the community.
Well, and I can attest to that because, you said that you kind of dig deep in women and help them ask those hard questions like, well, what is it that you would want to do if you could pick anything to do? Well, I already knew, where God was leading me, but you helped me start delegating things and just helping me with a schedule. Like you've helped me so much, just kind of breaking down those things and making the main things and not trying to do a million things at once, because that's something that I struggle with. And I'm a loner and I like to do things on my own. I've been like that since I was a little kid. And I would have never thought that coming into some type of group where there was mentorship would help me the way that it has, but it's helped me tremendously. And so, Jenna, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for you. I'm so thankful for the group of women that are also a part of Total Thrive. And we've learned so much from each other, and it's so much fun. I look forward to it every single time.
I do too. You guys are awesome. We're at the moment, we are small but mighty. Just really, it's again, that whole like-minded thing, we all, so far, the women that are in the group are all work from home. And so, yeah, we can get isolated. We can get that encouragement that I talked about a minute ago, how important it is to be encouraged. And sometimes just getting on a call once a week and just taking a moment and just chatting with each other. It's not even just about me and coaching and me having all the answers or me. It's all of us together sharing and praying with one another and supporting one another and lifting each other up and giving little suggestions and helping each other get clear on what it is that we're doing, and just be encouraged to go out, get encouraged and refreshed to go on and keep doing the thing and get more of that clarity, get more, all the things.
Absolutely. And I love what you said when you said it's not like I have all the answers, and I love that you don't pretend to have all the answers, but you are willing to dig deep and break it down and let's figure it out. Everything's figure outable. It's not about, well, let me tell y'all what to do, because right. I think that's probably what some people think of as whenever they go into any type of mentorship or coaching, but it's not like that at all. And it's so laid back, but it is refreshing. And it's so cool to hear what other people are doing, what other like-minded women are doing, and also being able to learn from each and every person. And something I'm learning the older I get is you just never know wherever God has you. You never know where one of those connections is going to blossom into something else down the road. And that's one of the main things that he has really showed me over these probably the last year for sure.
Yeah. And it's so amazing what each person brings to the group, right? And just from different backgrounds and different, we have the gal in Jamaica, right? And then someone she's a project manager working from home, has her own business. And then you and I are the creatives and doing more of the writing and the podcasting and, that kind of thing. And so, yeah. And yet all of us, even our friend Rebecca that does project management from home, she is so purpose driven. And she on the side has like her little a Christian jewelry business. And it's like all of us are very purpose driven and just gleaning from each other and just trying to live our best lives and shine for Jesus and all of that. So it's a great little group.
Yep, it sure is. And it feels like family. Whenever we get on our calls or on our Zooms, it feels like a family, and it feels so good. So obviously you do a lot of things, and God's called you into doing different things and at different times and different seasons. But what is, or do you have like a main thing that you're working on, that like a main assignment that he's called you into?
Total Thrive. About 7 years ago is when I just felt this calling to do it, and things became more clear for me about what it was going to look like, although it still wasn't all the way clear, but I had a beginning, I had an overall picture, and it just felt right and good to start working toward it. And so out of that comes, a bunch of mini assignments along the way. But I just started with what I knew.
So you are, I mean, I look at you and I think of you being like adventurous and kind of a risk taker, maybe. Would you describe yourself that way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I grew up, well, like I said, with the ministry and doing prison ministry and doing things that are so, I think, outside of the ordinary for probably most American families, even Christian families. The idea of a 9-to-5 job was never in my norm, and so the idea of having my own business, my own thing, has always, when I say always, since my divorce, since I haven't been a homemaker, has always been, I want to have my own schedule. I want to do my own thing. So what does that look like for me? And how do I make that happen? And so, yeah, always being driven to make that happen, but also in a very purpose-driven way, because I want to change lives, impact lives. I think all of us at our core want to fulfill purpose and impact lives.
Well, and because we were all created with a purpose, like there's something that feels unfulfilled from my experience and from others that I've talked to. There's an unfulfilled feeling if you're not just stepping into that purpose, even if you are called to be at home for a very long season, in that season with just being that example for your children. But I feel like if anybody who's not walking in that, unless they're masking it with something, then there's just like this unfulfilled feeling, a void inside of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing that I help women with. If they don't really know their purpose, if they don't really, maybe they have some ideas, but they're not believing in themselves that they could fulfill it. Maybe they have some dreams that they've kind of squashed down, or someone else has squashed for them. And so they have a hard time believing in themselves and believing in who made them and who created them and crafted them and gave them gifts and skills and abilities and a calling, and believing that, in their weakness, he is strong. Because it's not just about them being able to do the thing. It's about them being brave enough, like you've been brave enough to step into things that are uncomfortable and trust that, it's not all about you. It's about the women that you're serving, right?
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
and so for anyone listening right now, if you're feeling hesitant about moving toward a calling, a purpose, a thing, as an assignment, whatever word you want to give it, because you're like, oh, I could never be good enough at that, or, oh, there's enough other people doing that, or, oh, it's too scary. What if I fail? What if I look stupid? What if? But I know that Shay has learned this when she stepped into speaking, that she had that revelation. You can share it yourself, about it's not about you. It's about the women that you're serving, and finally surrendering to that. And now look what, how it's blessing others.
That's what God told me at the beginning of 2024. He said, I want you to start using your voice and stop hiding behind written word. I was like, oh, Lord, please don't do that to me. And he said, Shay, it's not about you. It's about the people I can touch through you. Something just changed in me. And I'm not saying that I don't get nervous or I don't, feel the emotions around it, but I know whenever it's all said and done, it really has nothing to do with me. It's his guiding, and all we have to do is say yes. And that's what I'm learning. It's just about saying yes over and over again to everything that he puts in front of us. And he has the provision, he has the plan, it's already there. And when we say yes, all of the resources for that assignment, they're already there. We just have to say yes and let him lead us through each assignment that he has for us. We've talked about steps a lot on this season with probably each episode. Do you feel like he works in steps with you? Like he gives you one step at a time? I think that so many women are afraid to step into that thing that God's calling them into, or maybe they're afraid to ask him what it is because they feel like they have to go figure it all out. And that's something that I'm really passionate about sharing. And you probably are too, but that it's not about figuring it all out. And he doesn't give you a million things to do at once, because that would be overwhelming. And if we saw the end picture and we didn't know how to get there, we would probably just be thinking, Lord, there's no way I can't do all of that. But I know with everyone I've talked to, he gives a step, and then you say yes to that step and do that thing. And then he gives another step. So do you have any experience with that, Jenna?
I mean, that's exactly, what I was going to say is like when I felt called to do what I called Total Thrive. At the time I didn't have a name yet, but that was my first step. What's the name going to be? Because the step that I knew I wanted to get to was creating that website and blogging, because I had experience with that, right? And so for me, that was kind of my first step. I don't know what it's all going to look like yet, but I know there needs to be a website and I need to start writing. And in order for there to be a website, I have to have a domain name. In order for there to be a domain name, I have to research names and what's available as a domain name. I knew I wanted to have something to do with thriving and flourishing. And so I looked up domain names that had to do with all of those things. And at the end of the day, totalthrive.com was available. And so that's where I started. That was my first step, right? And then I created the website. I started putting some blog posts out there. So you start with what you know. And exactly what you said, sometimes women don't want to start because they don't know all the steps. They don't know the whole picture. They don't know what it's all going to be. So they don't take any steps at all. Or they're afraid they're not going to take the right first step. And so they just don't take action at all. And then a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, they still haven't done anything. So all that to say, for me, it started with creating a website, finding a name, and blogging. Eventually, as time went on, I also was initially creating products. I was creating inspirational quote type products, mugs and different things to sell. And that was part of my idea of how I'm going to actually make money. And so that was sort of in the works, and I was kind of working on that. But every time somebody would ask me, well, what are you doing? What's new with you? And I'm like, oh, I'm all passionate about this thing I'm doing now called Total Thrive and I want to help women do this and that and the other. And as I would describe it, they would say, well, it's like your life coach. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not a life coach. Who am I to say that I'm a life coach? And I just sort of set it aside. And then I went to a conference where the speaker was actually Danny Johnson. And she had said, I want you to go to lunch with someone you don't know. Ask them what the number one thing is that they want to accomplish by the end of the year. I'm asking her, what is it you want to accomplish by the end of the year? And she tells me, and it was something that was very overwhelming to her, something that had just been just weighing on her for a couple of years. And it just something that was keeping her from moving on with her life. And she wasn't sure, it was sort of a legal thing. She wasn't sure what to do about it. And she just wasn't doing anything. I just started asking her questions just organically. Well, what is it you need to do? And she starts describing, well, there's a website I can go on and this and the other, but it's complicated. I don't know how to fill out the thing. And then she's kind of on her own says, someone gave me the name of someone that could help me with that. And I'm like, so you have that person's contact information? She's like, yeah. I'm like, so when are you going to contact her? And she's like thinking about it. She's like, well, I guess I could text her while I'm waiting to get on the plane tomorrow. And she's like, wow, it's like your life coach. And in that moment, it just was like the heavens opened up and the angels sang, oh, and it was like, oh, it really is like I'm a life coach, because that just came out of me so organically and so naturally. The next time I saw her at the next conference, she came running up to me so excited because she had done the thing and she had followed through and she was able to move on with her life. And she was so excited. And she's like, you changed my life. And that feeling that you get from impacting someone's life like that, from doing the thing that lights you up, that comes naturally to you because it's how God gifted you, and to listen to that. And also a giant how to know your purpose tip here is to pay attention to what other people say to you, because it was at least 3 people that said it's like you're a life coach before it finally, God knocked me on the head and it's like, are you listening? And so I got certified, became a certified Christian life coach. And that was clearly a big part of what God was doing with Total Thrive, but I didn't even know it in the beginning.
So cool how he works all these things simultaneously together for that other thing that he's leading you to. And the fact that you were at that conference, first of all, and that you got connected with that lady, went to lunch with her. You know what I mean? He just sets everything up. And I feel like you can't miss his call if you want to know what his call is for your life, because he's going to make sure that you know what it is. And he's so faithful in that way. And like you said, he was like, okay, Jenna, like that's 3 people. Are you getting it now? It's like, okay, so maybe you didn't get it from the first 2 people. So he put somebody else in your path to make sure that it's going to get in there. And honestly, for anybody listening, I've actually dealt with this question a lot. It's probably one of the main questions I've been getting on all the platforms in the last couple of weeks. It's hearing from God. And remember that God will use people to speak into your life. And just like Jenna said, don't dismiss that whenever other people are ministering to you or just speaking specific things. Pay attention to that, because sometimes that is God leading those people to speak those specific things to you. So don't dismiss those things. It's so important.
Right. And I feel like so often it can be easy to dismiss something when it just feels so outside of your norm, outside of like, that's not part of my identity. That's not how I identify. And who am I to say that I'm that? And well, who are you to say you're not that? That comes back to more things are possible than you can imagine. Letting yourself think outside of the box of what is your usual normal. So a lot of times it's related to just how you were raised, the people around you, what they're doing. If you grew up in a house where dad was a 9-to-5 job, everyone in your world was 9-to-5 job, the idea of being an entrepreneur is going to just seem so foreign to you, but you might be called to just that. Or, so don't let the circumstances around you, what other people around you think you're capable of or should be doing, dictate what is lighting you up and what do you want to do, and start exploring those ideas. Sometimes I say, just start exploring just the possibilities. Well, what if I started a business? What if I went to college? What if I fill in the blank, and you just start researching it and marinating on it and letting it maybe grow a little seed inside of you that might turn into something.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's so good. And just like you said, if you didn't grow up in that environment or that specific way, it's going to sound so foreign. And you've got to remember that only God knows the plan for you. And so even our family, sometimes they don't understand those things that God's calling us into. And they may think, man, she is crazy. What is she doing? This is so different, but that's okay. It's okay to be misunderstood, and it's okay to do something that's not traditional or something completely outside of the box. And I think for everybody, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And it's going to feel like it's so far out of reach, like it's something that you can't do, because if it's something that you could do, then it's not actually God working through you, right? Like he's the one that's doing the performing, he's doing the arranging and making sure everything's in place, and he gets the glory, right? Whenever he is working through us to touch the lives of others and we're just being obedient, the glory goes to him,
That's right.
If it's something we could do, then he doesn't get the glory for it, and that doesn't bring anybody into his kingdom.
That's right.
So just remember, if you're listening and you're feeling a tug at your heart to do something different, or maybe you don't know what that is yet, and it's something that you'll deal with in the future, just remember it's not going to feel like something that you can do in your own ability at all, and it's supposed to feel like that, and that's okay.
That's right. That's right. And also, be aware that if you have a dream in your heart and the people in your world that don't necessarily support that dream, that might not really, be the most encouraging, just don't talk about it around them. Just be about it with the people that do support you, that are going to lift you up and encourage you, and just don't talk about it around, the family member or the friend who just won't necessarily think that's the best idea. Or, a lot of times it's because they're trying to protect you. They're like, well, they don't want to see you fail or fall or get hurt by going down some path and doing something that, for whatever reason, they aren't as confident as you are about it. But the Bible says to guard your heart. And this is one of the ways that you can guard your heart, is if you feel like God's giving you a dream, a little something, a little inkling about something, protect it, because the mind is the first thing that's going to make you just say, no, I'm just not going to do that. That person said that to me, and they obviously don't believe in me. Who am I to believe in myself? And then immediately you're not doing the thing, and you never do the thing. So guard your heart.
Well, and just like God works through people, Satan will use people to speak different things into your life too. And that's the opposition comes from your mind, and that's the mental arena, and that's where Satan works, And so blocking out that noise, you got to block it out and spend that time with God and allow him to minister to you. And just like Jenna said, guys, the people that love us the most, they want to protect us, and it really usually comes from a place of love. But they want to tell you about an experience somebody else had, or an experience that maybe they had, or they're not maybe an adventurous person like you are. And anything that's outside of the norm, they think of as a risk. And just, you can't get offended. You can't take it personal. But just like Jenna said, not everybody needs to know about what the dreams are that God's put in your heart, because it's so important to keep that safe. we can, not only can we talk ourselves out of things, but we can allow other people to just really mess with us, mess with our mindset about things, and crush that dream that God's put inside of us. So important. And that's why, like for me, obviously my family completely on board with what I do, but I'm the only person in my family, my immediate family, that is kind of geared the way that I am. And so it's important to have that extra encouragement, like for the group that I'm in with you, Jenna, the mentorship there, the encouragement, like-minded people doing things like I'm doing. And it's important. It's very important who you surround yourself with. And I want to go ahead and say, I love my family, and they do support everything that I do. But there was a time where they were afraid for the things that I was doing. And it's out of love. It's out of love. I want to protect you for sure. So Jenna, so you are a busy woman and you do all kinds of different things, right? Like your assignment, like you said, is Total Thrive Women, but you are obviously, there's a lot of different things that go into that. I know exactly what you're talking about from building my own business. And then obviously you are a mom and you're a grandma and, you're doing all the things.
I'm also a worship leader. Yeah.
And a worship leader. Yes. Let's add that. A podcast host, YouTuber, you know what I mean? Like you do a lot of things and I know it can get overwhelming, and I've talked to you about that. You've helped me work through that as far as like the overwhelm and delegating things and, keeping the main things. And honestly, just giving myself grace that I can't get it all done. I can't do everything there is to do, and I can't be too hard on myself, but also we've got to make sure that we spend that time with God to get that leading from Him to where it is, whatever those assignments are, whatever it calls for, to get the leading, the guidance, not just for that, but for everything in life. And, I say it all the time, but faith cometh by hearing, hearing by the word of God, Romans 10:17, one of my all-time favorite scriptures, because so many people, so many women are like, how do I get faith? And, like that's the answer. It's through the word of God and that precious time with Him. It can be hard to find that time whenever, especially with those who are listening that have small children, school-age kids, a full-time job, a husband, all the responsibilities at the house. It can be overwhelming, and that time with God can very often get overlooked, and people just keep putting it off. And I've been there, you've probably been there, where you just put it off to the next day and the next day. Like everybody's different. And because we're all in different seasons, I know our time with God looks different, but I always think it's interesting to find out like what different women do and how you make God that number one priority and how you spend that time with Him. So would you share just a little bit about that, on what your routine looks like?
Yeah, definitely. And I do know what it was like being the mother, doing the homeschooling, trying to find and carve out that time and that routine with God was hard. And so I get that. And the people that maybe have to be at work at 8 a.m. and have an hour commute to get there, and then they have to get ready before that. And yeah, it can be rough. Right now, since I do live alone, I can kind of, I'm a little bit flexible with my schedule. And so I have the freedom to spend a decent amount of time with God in the morning. My morning starts, I love how my morning starts. It starts with You by Elevation Worship. If you're familiar with that song, it's just all about being in God's presence. I love the way it starts very softly and gently, because it's literally what wakes me up. I'm sleeping, and then I just start hearing this beautiful music playing. Basically, I wake up in the presence of God. And instead of having an alarm clock, I'm immediately in the presence of God. And I let myself usually lay there for at least the full song. And then I sit. For me, my quiet time is in my bed. And that is one thing. Now, a tip is knowing where am I going to have my quiet time. So for me, it's always, I just sit in my bed with my things all about me. I actually have two Bibles. I have my Passion Translation and my New Living Translation. And I keep them near me. And right now it's Jesus Always, the Jesus Calling series. This one is the Jesus Always, about being in His presence. And I just start having my time with Him, and me and Him and my coffee. I'll pray for a little bit. I'll read my Jesus Always for the day, and then read wherever I am in the Bible. For me, everybody has sort of a different thing. For me right now, I'm usually reading something in Psalms and or Proverbs, one or both. And right now I'm in Luke. So I'm just whatever the next thing is in Luke right now. I will usually read a chapter on one day and just read it. The next day I'll read it again and highlight and maybe underline and maybe look up a little study note thing and study it a little bit deeper. And it kind of gets into me twice before I move on. So that's sort of my routine.
Yeah, I love that. So, because I think that people can overthink that time with Him. And obviously, like you said, like you live alone, like your kids are grown. So you have like that extra time, maybe that extra space where you're not being interrupted to spend that time with him. And obviously other people, if they have school age kids or whatever, they could get up earlier. But for the woman who feels like there is no time, like where is that time supposed to come from? We've talked about this on some of the other sessions that we've done with some of the other ladies, but just making sure that you give him that time, that you give him that, make him that number one priority, make him that most important conversation. Would you have any advice on that?
I have a one-on-one coaching client right now who we've been working on this with because she has that desire but doesn't have the time and the routine down, and it's hard for her to spend that time. But basically, don't be afraid to start small. Don't discount how much 5 minutes can make.
Amen.
Because the idea with any routine, any habit, because you're trying to create the habit, right? You're trying to get into a routine and create a habit. You're trying to become a person who identifies with, I'm a person who spends time with God routinely, consistently, right? And so in order to identify as that person, because for me, it's so weird to not, any day that somehow something happens where I can't or whatever, it's like I have to do something. I have to read something. I have to do something, and it's just weird for me because it's become routine, because it's become habit, because I now identify as that person who does that. So if I don't do that, now I feel like, who am I? It just feels
right.
weird.
Yeah.
And so, so the idea in the beginning isn't even necessarily how quality of the time is. It's just about getting into the habit and routine and just giving yourself literally just 5 minutes if that's all you have. And then it will grow from there. Hopefully, ideally, it will grow from there if it becomes just a consistent part of your day. Also, a big part of having a morning routine and having time to do something in the morning is your night routine when you go to bed. I keep telling my coaching client, I'm like, you know what, can you just go to bed 5 minutes earlier? Can you go to bed 15 minutes earlier? Because that's part of her struggle is she goes to bed so late. And so she has a hard time getting up, and then she has to get to work. And I'm like, just 15 minutes, just 15 minutes. And it's hard. It's hard for me. That's part of why sometimes my morning times get shortened, is because I went to bed too late. I'm just like, just one more YouTube video or one more, TV show or whatever. And the next thing I know, now I'm basically, it's any one more thing is shortening my time with God the next day. And so I always have to remind myself the night before and be diligent about, okay, I just really got to turn off the stuff and go to bed, So so thinking of it the night before, if you're even trying to do it in the morning, because it doesn't have to be in the morning. That's another thing. I think ideally for most people that is a good time. Whatever you do first thing is the thing you're for sure going to get done, But for some people, the evening is better. And if knowing when it is, again, with any habit you're trying to create, when you know when you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, what implements you need, your Bible, your whatever things, a Bible study tool, a Bible study book, highlighters, pens, notebook, journal, digital journal, whatever your thing is, where you're going to do it, what you're going to use to do it, what the plan is, you're more likely to actually implement it.
So true. God's not looking for a 2-hour sit down with everyone. I mean, would he want that? Yes, absolutely. He wants all the time he can get with you. But if you are somebody, like Jenna said, that you have just that 5 minutes, start there. He wants to spend time with you. He wants to know you. And just like any other relationship, you can't get to know somebody if you're not spending time with them. And so that's what I always tell people too. Make sure that you're spending time with him so that you can get to know him. And the more time you spend with him, the greater the desire grows to spend time with him. And then the easier it is to discern his voice, to feel that leading, that sense that you get from the Holy Spirit when he's leading you somewhere specific. Like you said, Jenna, that 5 minutes, that turns into a greater desire to where you want to spend more time with him. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I always think it's so interesting to different women in different seasons of their life, kind of what that time looks like for them. And like you said, you feel odd, or your day feels off if you haven't had that quality time with him. So you're like, I got to do something. I got to get the word in me somehow, or I got to spend some time with him somehow. And that's what it's like. It's just, you just continue getting a greater desire for him and for his presence. So I also love to ask this question. I think I already know the answer for you with this question, but most women that I've personally talked to, they say that whenever they found out what those assignments were, or what that specific calling that God had on their life was there was a turning point in their life. Like it felt like they kind of hit rock bottom, or it felt like they just completely came to the ends of themselves. Like they didn't know what else to do. And then all of a sudden, whenever they got to that point, like that's when things started turning around for them. So did you have a turning point in your life to where you started sensing a leading from the Lord on what he was calling you into?
Well, my timeline kind of goes along with my whole being married, divorcing, my single life, my new life now. Always felt the presence of God from the time that I could remember. I always just knew he was there, and that was never a question. And I talked a little bit about in my earlier years when I was married, and yeah, it was a struggle sometimes to have that quality time with God every day. And so I would go in and out of that. But it was kind of funny. You talk about there being that time in your life, a pivotal time, like a trauma. And I guess you could say that was part of it for me. I think it was a combination of life, how life evolved to me being single, as well as my trauma that I was going through. Because now, right before the divorce, the actual separation, let's call it, in 2014 is when I actually separated. 2 years before that is when I found out that my husband had an affair. And that's when I had a major spiritual crisis, I would say. It wasn't just that thing, it was things leading up to that, but it's sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I could not pray other than sometimes screaming at God. I couldn't worship, which is huge because I'm a worship leader. At that time, I wasn't leading worship at my church. I had stepped away from that a couple years before for other reasons, and won't get into that. But I just went through such a dark time where I'm like, I didn't lose my salvation. I still believed in God. I still believed all these things deep down. I mean, like, I know I have to believe he's good, but I'm not feeling the goodness right now. And what's the point of praying? I didn't have the faith to believe that any prayer I prayed was going to get answered ever. And I was like, what's the point? I remember my sister calling and asking me to pray for her. She was going to have surgery the next day. I said, I just was honest with her. I said, I can't, because I don't believe that God's going to hear my, she knew what I was going through and she understood. I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to tell her I'm going to pray when I'm not. When I tell somebody I'm going to pray, I make sure I do it. And I'm very much about that. I don't want to just flippantly say I'm going to pray for you if I'm not going to pray. So I was literally, that's the season that I was in. And it was a long journey over the next, I would say leading up to the actual separation. About 6 months before that, before I started slowly coming out of that, slowly coming back to God. I can't tell you how much the song Oceans was to me. That was like the first song. I would cling to that song. And so it was a darn good thing that had come to a better place with him where I was leaning on him and trusting him when the actual separation happened, because he was all part of that. He released me. I was not going to leave. This is not going to be a thing. I am a Christian woman. I don't believe in divorce. Right. And so just having come back to him in that way, and having that stronger intimacy with him at that time was huge in getting me through that whole next season. And I had to cling to him. I had to spend that time with him every day. I was desperate because I was freaked out of my mind. No joke. I was freaked out of my mind to be alone in an apartment, not knowing how I was going to pay rent. It was scary. And what does my future hold? I didn't know if I was actually getting divorced or not. I didn't know what was going to happen. There was a lot of unknowns, and I was desperate for God to be with me every second, every moment, and he was. So, if you want to say if there was a turning point in me getting really serious about my time with God, I suppose it was during that time.
Wow. So I haven't even heard all of that story. Wow, Jenna, that's amazing that who you are now versus thinking about you having trouble praying. I can only imagine that has just made your relationship stronger with God. And what a testimony, too, to say,
right. And he was so faithful. I went through that super scary, like the worst time of my life. And he really, really was there. I mean, I could tell you story after story of his provision, of him guiding me here, and the places that he helped me figure out living in, and the miracle stories of that. The miracle story, how I got to go to Australia, New Zealand, and just one thing after another. God has just been there and been there and been there and been there. And my quality time with him every day, and soaking in his presence, and being intentional even throughout the day to talk to him and pray and just get his input throughout the day. Okay, Lord, what are we doing now? Has been just invaluable. I can't even imagine going through what I went through without him. When people go through trauma, they either turn to God or away from God. They either run to him in his arms, Lord, I need you, which is luckily what I did, or they run completely away from him, which is sort of what I did when I went through my crisis. It wasn't about me running away from him. It was just like, I don't even know anymore. And I was just, I was just crushed. But yeah, some people will just turn away and just like, I'm mad at God and I don't even gonna go in there. I was never going to go all the way away from God. That was never what I was going to do. But yeah, so yeah, I ran to God, and I can't imagine going through anything like that without him.
That's powerful. And that must be another reason. I don't feel like God does hard or bad things to us, obviously, but he turns those really hard seasons into something good if we'll allow him. And that, I mean, the Bible tells us that in Romans 8:28. So I feel like that testimony has probably impacted the lives of other women. Plus, like all the things that you're doing now, I can only imagine. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but these are probably not things that you would be doing. Yeah, I'm sure you have a different mindset and a different heart set, your relationship stronger with him, and you are stepping more fully into that calling that God's called you into, is what it sounds like, through that really hard season.
Yeah, I pretty confident I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I were still married. And I might be doing a variation of it. I always had aspirations to write. Now, I have not written a book yet, like my friend Shay has now. Are we allowed to talk about the second one?
Yeah.
The books are coming for Shay, and I know that's coming for me. But I do see, regardless of, but you know what, I didn't. If I were married, I wouldn't be as motivated to like, I got to earn a living. So therefore, how can I make this successful so that I can pay the bills and do this as my full-time thing? Because, and so sometimes it's tension like that at a necessity or need that pushes you to do something that you might not have done otherwise. Again, you become stronger than you thought, and you're more motivated to do things that you might not have done otherwise. But having said the writing, I do want to backtrack just a little bit and say that I have written some articles, and I'm very excited that an article is coming out in Just Between Us magazine, probably not long after or even before this podcast episode airs. The spring issue of Just Between Us magazine. If you're familiar with that magazine, if you're not, go on. It's a beautiful magazine. Lisa Turkhurst and other people write for it, and I'm honored that they accepted my article. It's think about what you're thinking about. Your life is shaped by your thoughts.
I can't wait to read it myself. And I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you I'm sure that, I don't know if it was out of your comfort zone or not, but for pushing yourself to do it. And, you had to talk to somebody to get the article in there. And the fact that they want it in there, that speaks volumes anyways. But I know that that's going to impact lives. And kind of going back to what we were talking about, the opposition, it's up here, it's all about mindset and what you're thinking about. I can't wait to read that. That's going to be amazing. Hopefully it's just right on the verge or has already come out, and we can add that to the show notes too and direct people to that. So I have a couple more questions before I let you go today. And I think this will be actually a really good question for you because you work with so many women, and that's where your heart is. And like, I know your heart from working with you and from knowing you for the time that I have, but you really are a servant-hearted person to other women, and you're not trying to get anything in return. And I know that because I know you. But as far as those who maybe they're just stepping into that calling, and I know we've talked about that a little bit, but what advice do you have for women listening to this that are, whether it's strengthening their relationship with the Lord or strengthening their faith in Him for those assignments for them? What would you say to them?
Well, it's stuff that we've already touched on, but it's like, it all comes back to thinking about what you're thinking about, what I literally just said. I like to say, keeping your eyeballs on Jesus.
Yes.
Stay in the Word. Find even a little bit of time, to be in the Word, be intentional about your prayer time. Even if, okay, you didn't read your Bible this morning, but now you're driving somewhere for half an hour or even 5 minutes. Take time during that 5-minute drive to pray. Maybe put on a sermon or a podcast that lifts you up, like The Covenant Woman by Shayla, or Total Thrive podcast.
Yes.
Put on things that are going to encourage you, whether it's podcasts, YouTube, books, sermons. Surrounding yourself with the people we talked about, surrounding yourself with people that are going to lift you up, not tear you down. Surrounding yourself with like-minded Christian people, mentors, people that are going to encourage you, people that are going to feed you. All of those things are ways that you grow in your relationship with God, that you get more faith in stepping into something that maybe you're uncomfortable stepping into. The more time you spend around something that is uncomfortable, the less uncomfortable it feels, the more comfortable it will feel. Someone who maybe feels a calling to say, be a speaker, and it's just freaking you out. Well, the more you listen to podcasts about speaking, the more you go to speaking events, the more you befriend people who are speakers, the more you surround yourself with that mindset and that philosophy, and you see what it's like to be them. You see what it starts to feel more doable and beable, if you want to call it that. You start to identify, I could maybe do that. It reminds me, Monty Roberts is a horse trainer that my daughter followed. Both of my daughters did hunter jumper horse shows and all of that. And my older daughter wanted to be a horse trainer. We went to a Monty Roberts. He's sort of a celebrity horse trainer dude, if you're familiar with him. They call it like a horse training clinic. And he would randomly take people to bring their horses, say, my horse has this problem. And he would work that with that horse in front of everyone and train them and fix whatever their issue is. This one horse was completely afraid of water. And so he took this horse. He had a tarp in the middle of the round pen, and he had a blue tarp that simulated the water, but also was scary sounding to step on. And that horse did not want to step on that tarp. He was not going to step on that tarp. He would go back and forth with the horse, leading him over that tarp, and he would jump over it every time, until one time accidentally his foot touched it. And another time it actually touched it. And the more he did it, the horse started getting less and less afraid of that tarp. And suddenly he was just walking back and forth across it like it was no big deal. And so this is what I think it's like for us anytime we're afraid of something. There's a podcast host, super famous podcast host, whose name is escaping me right now. Your listeners might know who he is, but he talks about touching your dream, putting yourself in situations where you're around what other people are living the life that you want to live, or doing the thing that you want to do, and experiencing the thing that you want to experience that seems so outside of your reach. But the more you touch your dream, the more it starts to feel real, and you start to identify as that person who can actually have that dream.
That's a good example. You're like, I was visualizing that as you were talking about the horse and the tarp. So I have one more question before I ask you the last one. What is your favorite scripture? Or do you have a favorite scripture?
Well, of course. I mean, I have several, of course, but I'm going to limit it to two. And the first one is the very first verse that I remember memorizing as a child. I grew up. There's another thing that I'm all about is encouraging people to hide the scripture in their heart, to actually make a point to memorize scripture. And that you have to be very intentional about that if you're going to choose to do that. But as I grew up going to Christian school, private school, and we had to memorize a verse every single week. And so the first verse that I remember memorizing was in second grade, and it was, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13. And that was my favorite verse. For a lot of my life, I referred to that as my favorite verse into adulthood and everything. I always referred to it as that. Now I'm not sure it's my favorite one because there's so many other great ones, but it's definitely way up there. For crying out loud, as a life coach, how could that not be? Trying to inspire women to trust that God is stronger than you, and to lean into Him and have faith and take risks and to trust that you can do all things through Christ. He strengthens you. You are stronger than you think. You are capable than you know. All the things. So that's one of them. The other one is what I consider the theme verse for Total Thrive, which is Ephesians 3:20. And I love it in the Passion Translation, which is, never doubt God's mighty power to work in you and accomplish all this. He will achieve infinitely more than your greatest request, your most unbelievable dream, and exceed your wildest imagination. He will outdo them all, for His miraculous power constantly energizes you.
So such a great reminder, too. No wonder that's your favorite verse.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I love it. Well, I guess we've kind of come to the end of this interview. So I know after hearing this, others are going to want to connect with you. And can you tell us just the different ways? I know that you have a few different ways to connect with you. So can you tell us how to do that?
Right. So probably the best way where you can find out all the other ways is totalthrive.com. And same thing on YouTube. It's the Total Thrive podcast YouTube channel. Same thing on all the podcast, platforms. You can look up Total Thrive. You can look up Jenna Dexter, and you'll find me there. And I do have Instagram. I have not been active on it in a while. Perhaps by the time this airs, I'll start getting active. But I do check my DMs every now and then. I do go on it every now and then. I just haven't been posting. So if you DM me there at my Instagram, I think my handle is at totalthrive.jennadexter. But again, put in the names, you'll find me. Also on my website, you can download my free Discover Your Purpose You can download my free Discover Your Purpose guide, which will help you discover your purpose, obviously. And that will also get you on my email list. You can also just scroll down further and sign up for the email list. Either one of them gets you on my email list. Now, in the process, hopefully it will be up. It will be my goal, the mind makeover. And it all goes back to what I talked about in that article about think about what you're thinking about. Your life is shaped by your thoughts, and how important our thoughts and our mind is to what we actually accomplish, and our inner peace and our inner joy, and so many things. As a free resource that will also get you on my email list if you'd like.
Awesome, Jenna. You are so fun. You're so energetic. You're such a light. And I'm sure that other people probably tell you that all the time, but you're just such a light, and you make things feel like they flow easy, and you just make things fun. Anyways, Jenna, thank you so much. It was an honor having you here. I'm so thankful. I'm just thankful for you. I admire you so much with all the different things that you do, and taking that leap of faith, and saying yes to God in the different things, because we don't have to say yes. You don't have to say yes to the things that he calls you to do, but you choose to. And I just admire you so much for what you're doing for other women, for what you've done for me. And you guys have got to connect with her. She is, like I said, she's kind of like the life of the party. She's fun, but yet you get a sense of calming from just being around her, and anything that she puts out there, like she was talking about her email list, with the new resource that she will have up, obviously the group that I'm a part of with her. I'm so thankful that I'm a part of this group with you, Jenna. But anything that you do, it's so well thought out. You don't just rush through anything just to get something out there. So for those of you who you do go to her website, just know that it's been well thought out. It's worth your time, and she's invested a lot of time into anything that she does. So just know that ahead of time, so that you know that it's worth your while. So anyways, thank you
I appreciate
again.
that.
You're welcome. It's the truth. I appreciate you so much. And I can't wait to have you on here again one day when God calls you into some more assignments.
Definitely. And you will be on my podcast as well.
So I can't wait. Thanks so much. And thank you guys all for joining. If you listen to this podcast, I believe God led you here for a reason. Visit thecovenantwoman.org to learn of upcoming events, stay inspired in your faith walk, and feel free to check out the books. If this message blessed you, please pass it along to a friend.